this thing on? Okay, so today we talk about social influence. What is social influence? Well, before we get started with that, let me show you a little video. Here we go.
Die Mutter schüttelt's Bäumelein, da fällt herab ein Träumelein. Schlaf, Kindlein, schlaf.
So we still don't know for sure why we yawn. There's a lot of research going on, some say it cools the brain, others say it is all about empathy and so on. But what we do know is that yawning seems to be contagious. So when you see somebody yawn, or even when you hear people talking about yawning, or probably you watch this video and I keep repeating myself by talking about yawning, yawn, 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 you are more likely to yawn yourself. God, even I have to yawn. So, yawning is a funny one. We know it is socially contagious. And what do we mean with socially contagious? Well, essentially, there is no physical virus that gets transmitted. It's not like a disease where a virus spreads from one person to the other and that causes a disease to spread. But in this case, it seems to be like a behavior that spreads. And yawning is socially contagious, and we know from other research, same holds for obesity. Yeah, people are more likely to become obese when close people around them are obese. Same holds for crime, holds for suicide, for divorce, for stress, for pregnancy, smoking, and for getting a job. So all these things seem to spread. They seem to be contagious, even though nothing really spreads. And that's social influence. So here I have a definition. Social influence is defined as change in an individual's thoughts, feelings, attitudes, or behaviors that result from interaction with another individual or a group. So you interact with others or with a group, and because of that interaction, you change your own behavior, your own individual thoughts, feelings, and attitudes. Social influence is studied by different kinds of people. For example, social psychologists, they are interested in why we get influenced by others. And there things become relevant like conformity or compliance or obedience. But for us, social influence is interesting in another context. So in analytical sociology, we are concerned about how social structure affects social influence, but then also what are the implications of social influence for macro level phenomena. And that's what we are talking about now. So here we are, we have our macro schema, our Coleman's boat, and we have macro level phenomena that we might want to connect with each other. But we now understood that individuals behave within a macro context. So I experience the world through the relationships that I have. The macro phenomena, the social structure matters for how I experience the world, and then I behave in a certain way. And once I behave, that affects other people, other people that are related with me, and it might actually have an impact on macro level phenomena again. So I brought two studies with me that look a little closer into how the macro and the micro level link together in the context of social influence. The first one is a classic. It's the medical innovation study by Coleman, Katz, and Menzel. And a second one is like a recent study on cultural markets. So let's jump into the first study that I want to talk about. This is a classic study in sociology, one of the first that looked at social influence. And it still shows nicely how macro level phenomena like social networks, the structures that people are embedded in, how these things matter for social influence, in this case for the prescription of a new drug. So we are putting this into the context of our boat that we have. We have macro level phenomena, and now we're looking at how network structures affect how individuals experience things, and then ultimately how they behave. And in this case, it shows in how the networks in which doctors are embedded in matter for these doctors prescribing a new drug. So Coleman and others, back in the 1950s, God, it's a long time ago. So back in the days, Coleman and colleagues, they conducted this study on the introduction of this new antibiotic tetracycline. This antibiotic came onto the market, and the pharma industry, they wanted to know how do doctors adopt prescribing this new drug. And this drug was clearly better than other antibiotics that were on the market before. So it really was a good instance to study how things diffuse. So what they did, they interviewed all medical doctors in 4 cities in Illinois. And then what they did, they actually went to pharmacies. And from those pharmacies, they collected information on which doctor had prescribed which drug when. And the question that they had was, when did medical doctors start prescribing the new drug? But they didn't just do that. So they also went to these medical doctors in these 4 cities in Illinois, to all of them, and they asked them about who are your friends, with whom do you discuss your cases, and also to whom do you often turn for advice and information. And these kind of questions nowadays we would call them network generators, because they generate the networks that you might have seen before. And then they brought these two pieces of information together. So on the one side, the records on prescription. On the other side, the information on who is related with whom. And this was the result. It's like an old graph, but still on the x-axis you have the time after that new drug came into the market. And on the y-axis you see the cumulative proportion of doctors who had prescribed this drug. So that's basically just the share of doctors that had prescribed this new drug. But now you see three different lines. And what do these three different lines stand for? Well, now they kind of looked at separately only for those doctors who didn't nominate any friends. In this network generation question, they didn't mention any other doctor as a friend. And that is the line at the bottom. And then the line in the middle that shows you the adoption for those doctors who had nominated one or two other doctors as friends. And the line at the top shows you the adoption for those doctors who had 3 or more friends among other doctors being nominated. And what we can read out of that graph is, first of all, generally adoption goes up, like this drug was clearly better, so more and more people prescribe it within a year. But then we also see that this adoption seems to happen at different speeds, depending on how many friends among other doctors those doctors had. So the network structure around those doctors seems to have mattered for how quickly they start prescribing this new drug. Basically, when somebody was tightly embedded into a network of other doctors as friends, that person was more likely to prescribe that drug earlier. While somebody who was not that well connected, who had fewer friends among the doctors in those 4 cities, was slower in adopting the prescription of this new drug. So doctors who were mentioned by their colleagues as either friend, advisor, or discussion partner prescribed the new drug on average earlier than those who were named by few or none of their colleagues. Different kinds of networks mattered at different times. At first, the discussion and the advice network mattered more, while later the friendship network mattered. There's even more data that I didn't present, that these doctors were even more likely to get influenced by others in uncertain situations. So this is a classic study on social influence, the medical innovation study by Coleman and others. First of all, showing that there is social influence. People are more likely to adopt a certain behavior when other people around them already adopted that behavior. There is no physical virus being transmitted, but it seems to follow the dynamic of the spreading of a disease. So behaviors, in this case the prescription of a drug, can spread almost like a disease. Let me talk about the second study that I want to bring in here. And this is a study, you guys had to read this chapter in preparation for this today. A study conducted by Duncan Watts and colleagues, Matt Salganic and Peter Dodds were involved in it as well. A series of experiments that they conducted on cultural markets. And looking at our micro-macro schema, where are we now? So the cultural market studies, they start at the point where people hear about something, in this case about the success of certain music, the success in cultural markets, that affects individuals, but then it also leads to broader macro level outcomes, such as inequality and unpredictability. So what did they do? So Salganic and others, they created a website. This was in the mid-2000s, so this was quite innovative at the time. They created a website where participants could listen to, rate, and download songs by unknown bands. It's funny, this was really before Spotify and Apple Music and these kind of things. So it was a big deal to have a website where you could go and you could listen to music for free. It was also a big deal to conduct a study like this on the internet. Nowadays we do that more, but at the time that was really new. So they had this fake website where people could listen to songs of unknown artists, and over 16,000 people participated in this. So they signed up for it and they downloaded the songs of those artists. But the researchers, Salganik and others, they controlled the information that the participants, so the people that went on this website, received about these songs. So this is how the design looked like. Participants went to this website, and on this website they had these songs to choose from. They could listen to these songs, and afterwards they would rate these songs. But that wasn't all. That was what they call the independent condition. So half of the people ended up just listening to the songs and rating the songs at the end of the day. Some people were routed into what they called the social influence condition. And in the social influence condition, people got information about how much other people like these songs. Okay, so in this first experiment, what they did, people went to the website, they saw the songs, but the songs, they were in a random order, with ratings that other people gave those songs. And then the question was like, how many people listened to that song? And because there was no sorting of the songs by popularity, but still there was some information about how many other people listened and downloaded that song. That's what Salganik and others called the weak social influence condition. And that's how it looked like. So basically you see, this really was the website, Music Lab, and people would go into this website and they saw these songs, and then there was a number next to the song which gave the information about how many other people had already downloaded that song. And when you look through that, these are the numbers. There is no order here. They are just randomly moved around. Sometimes there's a song with lots of downloads, sometimes there's a song with only a few downloads. And this is what people saw when they went into the website. So this is the weak social influence condition. Social influence because people saw how many other people downloaded a song, right? And then the question is, will they download the song? And does that information matter? How many other people already downloaded a song? But it's weak because there's no real ordering in this. They also conducted a second experiment. So in this experiment, they have something that they call the strong social influence condition. So it's like before, but now those songs were ordered according to how many other people had already downloaded that song. So here you go. This is how the website looked like. And we look at it, you see now the song which got the most downloads is at the very top. And this, as you go further down that list, the number of downloads songs had goes down. So again, this gives people information about how many other people downloaded a song, but it even orders it around it. So that's sort of why they call that the strong social influence condition. And they compared both of these conditions with an independent condition where people didn't get any information about how many times other people had downloaded the song. And at the end of the day, people listened to the song, and that's sort of how it looked like. They gave the song a rating, like how many stars, how much did you like this song? And the key here is they compared both of this weak social influence condition and the strong social influence condition with an independent condition. And the independent condition, people got no information at all about how many other people downloaded a song. And then you can look at how high are these ratings. And the question then becomes, do people rate a song higher when they know that other people like that song? And you see, if social influence wouldn't matter, there shouldn't be a difference between how much people like a song and how they rate a song. Okay, so here are some results from these studies, the first and the second experiment, the weak and the strong social influence condition. And in both, you see now white dots, which represent in this graph the independent condition, which is the case where nobody knows about anybody else. You don't know how others like the song. And then you have the gray dots. They correspond to the social influence condition, either strong or weak, where people knew about how other people rated and downloaded a song. And what you see here is on the x-axis the ranked market share. So that's like how highly ranked was that song. Like was it the top song or was it the bottom song? And on the y-axis you see the probability for listening. And what you see here is that in the social influence condition, this goes up like that. So that means in the social influence condition where people have the information about how others like the song, the songs that are rated highest are also more likely to get listened to. Essentially, it really just shows that when you tell people how others like songs, these people are more likely to listen to the songs that have been rated high. Okay, so we do have some evidence for social influence, but now this study gets a little more interesting. And it has to do with the fact that you don't just have people going to either the independent condition or the social influence condition, but what they actually did, they sent people into different worlds. They sent people into different worlds. And that's fascinating. That's one of the things that we cannot really do in the real world. We cannot send people into different realities. But online, we can. And that's what they did over here. So now you see their actual design was more like this. People went onto the website, they could listen to the songs, and then some people were straight sent into the independent condition where they just rated the songs and they had no information from other people rating these songs. But then some people were sent into these social influence conditions, and instead of just sending them into one social influence condition, they sent them into 8 different social influence worlds. So in each world, the rules were exactly the same. It was either strong or weak social influence, but people could only see the information of other people in that world.
Aha!
And in this case, we can show that social influence can actually lead to inequality and later on even to unpredictability. Okay, so one way of looking at inequality in a general way is looking at what we call the Gini coefficient. The Gini coefficient is really just a number that goes from 0 to 1. Imagine all of the songs would get downloaded exactly the same number of times. Then the Gini coefficient would be 0. There's no inequality. While in the other extreme, if let's say you have 100 songs and 99 don't get downloaded at all, and one song gets downloaded 1,000 times, then the Gini coefficient is at its maximum and it would be 1. So the Gini coefficient really is just a measure for inequality. Let's not get distracted by the Gini coefficient. The thing is, it's a measure for inequality, and that's what they use in this study to find out how popular were these songs and how different were they in their popularity. And here it gets interesting when you now look at these different social influence conditions. So these are, these 8 different worlds represented by the dark gray bars, and they compare it against this independent world or where people had no information about others. And what you can see is that this Gini coefficient is higher the stronger the social influence is. So in the strong social influence condition, the Gini coefficient is much higher than in the independent condition. So essentially, when you show people how much others liked a song, like how many other people downloaded that song, the differences between the most popular song and the least popular song, they become bigger. It becomes more unequal. People go to listen to the most favorite song and don't listen to the least favorite songs anymore. So social influence can really amplify inequality. Okay, but there was a second thing they did, and that's also very neat. They showed that social influence does not only lead to more inequality, but it can also lead to unpredictability. How did they do that? Predictability would be high if, let's say, one song would always land at the top spot, right? If the ordering of the songs would always be the same, no matter at which of those 8 different worlds the social influence unfolded. But as it turns out, in each of these different social worlds that we artificially created, there's a different order. And you can measure this predictability or unpredictability by looking at how were these songs rated in the different worlds. And they have this MIJ, which is the market share of song I in world J, right? And you kind of compare that across all the worlds and you sum that up, and and if all the songs would be in the same order in all of those 8 worlds, this number should be 0. That means unpredictability would be low, meaning there would always be the same outcome, regardless of whether people were in this world, that world, or in another world. As long as there's social influence going on, there would be the same outcome. And then again, they compared that with the independent condition, which is where people didn't have any information about the songs. And first of all, it shows that in the social influence conditions, there was more unpredictability. So as soon as you threw in social influence into the mix and people would get influenced by each other, it would be much harder to predict which song would land at the top and which song at the bottom. And that unpredictability is even more pronounced when you have the strong social influence condition. Remember, this is where people didn't just see how many downloads a song got, but the songs were also ordered according to that number. So to summarize, social influence really seems to have an effect on how well we can predict something. It makes it really difficult. And, that's not really surprising. You guys experience that all day long. We are in the web and suddenly some videos or some memes, they just go viral and you would have no idea about it. Sometimes you just can't tell which things become popular and which things just disappear. It seems to be a bit random, but actually social influence plays an important role for that. So to summarize, in these Music Lab studies, Salganik, Watts and others, and Dodds, they found that social influence at the micro level leads to inequality and to unpredictability of success at the macro level. Okay, so to summarize, we have our micro-macro schema, that's what you see here before, and now social influence comes into play. And social influence can matter in different ways. On the one side, something like network structure, this is like a macro-level phenomena, can influence how individuals experience the world, and then it affects their behavior. Think of the prescription of drugs in the medical innovation study. But then I also showed you that social influence can also generate macro-level outcomes in the sense that people hear about others liking songs, and then depending on how that works, whether there's a strong or weak social influence condition or no influence condition, this can lead to inequality and to unpredictability, in this case of success of songs, of popularity at the macro level. And so much about social influence for now.
The gentleman in the elevator now is a candid star. These folks who are entering, the man with the white shirt, the lady with the trench coat, and subsequently one other member of our staff, will face the rear. And you'll see how this man in the trench coat tries to maintain his individuality little by little, he looks at his watch, but he's really making an excuse for turning just a little bit more to the wall. Now we'll try it once again. Here's the candid subject. Here comes the candid camera staff, 3 of them at least. And this man has apparently been in groups before. Now, here's a fella with his hat on in the elevator. First he makes a full turn to the rear and Charlie closes the door. A moment later, we'll open the door, everybody's changed positions. Now we'll see if we can use group pressure for some good. Now, in a moment, on Charlie's signal, everybody turns forward. Notice they take off their hats. And now, do you think we could reverse the procedure? Watch.